You finally did it. You left. You walked away from the chaos, the manipulation, the endless cycle of hope and devastation. You're free now. So why does freedom feel like drowning in emptiness? Maybe you lie awake at 3 in the morning, staring at the ceiling thinking, I should feel relief. I should feel lighter. But instead, I feel nothing. Like someone reached inside my chest, scooped out everything that made me feel alive, and left me hollow. Your friends don't understand. They say things like, you should be happy now, or at least you're free. And you nod, you smile because you know they're right. But late at night, when you're alone with that vast, cold emptiness inside you, a terrifying question whispers through your mind. Did I make a mistake? Here's what nobody tells you about leaving a narcissistic relationship. The hardest part isn't the leaving itself. It's what comes after. It's the silence, the void, the strange, disorienting feeling that you've somehow lost yourself along with them. But what if I told you that this emptiness isn't a sign that you still love them? What if I told you it's not evidence that you made the wrong choice, or that you're broken, or that you'll never feel whole again? What if the emptiness you're feeling right now is actually a sign that your soul is preparing for rebirth? This isn't some feel-good platitude. This is psychology. This is depth. This is what happens when you understand the hidden architecture of the psyche and why certain relationships don't just hurt us, they transform us at the deepest level. Over the next 50 minutes, we're going to journey through a map of the human soul, drawn by one of the greatest minds in psychological history. We're going to understand why the relationship with a narcissist was so powerful, why leaving feels like losing yourself, and what that emptiness actually means. Because you're not broken. You're between worlds. You're in the space between who you were and who you're becoming. And that space, as terrifying as it feels, is sacred. The relationship you just left wasn't random. It wasn't bad luck or poor judgment. From the perspective of depth psychology, it was an archetypal collision. Two patterns as old as human consciousness itself met in you and that other person, and when they touched, something chemical happened, something that changed both of you forever. One of the foundational insights of analytical psychology is this: when two personalities meet, if there's any real reaction, both are transformed. Not just affected, transformed. Changed at the root level of who they are. You experience this. You went into that relationship as one person and emerged as someone you barely recognize. The question is, who is this person you're becoming? And why does the journey from old self to new self have to pass through this terrible emptiness? Tonight, we excavate answers. Not the surface answers about narcissistic personality disorder or toxic relationships. Deeper answers, soul answers. The kind of understanding that doesn't just help you survive this experience, but transforms it into the catalyst for becoming fully, authentically yourself for the first time in your life. The narcissist was never your soulmate. They were your teacher. And the emptiness isn't the end of your story. It's the beginning of your becoming. Let's begin. Before we dive deeper, if this resonates with your soul's journey, please hit that like button and subscribe for more transformational content. Your support helps this message reach other souls who need to hear it. Why you couldn't just walk away. Why even now, free from the chaos, part of you misses the intensity. This wasn't just toxic love. This was something that operated at a level beneath your conscious awareness, in the realm of symbols, patterns, and ancient psychological structures that shape human behavior across all cultures and all time. We're talking about archetypes. These are primordial patterns that exist in what's called the collective unconscious and the deepest layer of the psyche that we all share. Think of archetypes as psychological instincts, templates for human experience that are hardwired into us. When you met that narcissist, what actually happened was an archetypal collision. Two shadows met. Two wounded patterns recognized each other instantly, and locked together like puzzle pieces. Let me show you what I mean. The narcissist carries what we might call the shadow of power. On the surface, they appear confident, magnetic, superior. But beneath that grandiosity lives something very different, profound shame, and a terror of vulnerability. They've disconnected from their authentic self because looking inward means confronting an unbearable sense of deficiency. So they live on the surface. They need constant validation, constant admiration, constant proof that they matter. Because without it, they fear they'll disappear. They've created a false self, a magnificent mask, and they're trapped inside it. Now here's where it gets interesting. You came into that relationship carrying your own shadow. We might call it the shadow of sacrifice. Somewhere along the way, probably in childhood, you learned that your worth was conditional. That you mattered only when you were useful, only when you were giving, only when you were saving someone. You developed an unconscious belief. I am valuable because I can endure. I am lovable because I can heal. I matter because someone needs me. This isn't conscious. You probably think of yourself as a kind person, an empathetic person, someone who just naturally cares deeply, and you are. But underneath the genuine compassion lives something else, a hunger to prove. Through your capacity to love the unlovable, that you are finally enough. When these two shadows met, an unconscious contract formed. The narcissist said without words, "Reflect my greatness, never challenge me, and I'll give you purpose. I'll give you the ultimate project fixing me." And you said without words, "Need me completely, make me essential, and I'll prove that my love can heal anything. I'll finally matter." Two halves of a broken mirror trying to become whole through each other. This is the work of Carl Jung, empath, and personal development teaches us to recognize we don't actually see other people as they truly are. We see them through the lens of our unconscious needs, fears, and disowned parts. We project onto them. Projection is one of the most powerful mechanisms in human psychology. It's how we take parts of ourselves that we can't accept or don't recognize and cast them onto other people. Then we relate to those people as if they actually are what we've projected onto them. In your relationship with the narcissist, you were projecting constantly. You weren't just in love with who they actually were. You were in love with what they represented, the qualities you'd rejected or denied in yourself. Think about it. What did you admire about them, especially at the beginning? Maybe it was their confidence, their ability to not care what others thought, their self-focus, their certainty, their capacity to put themselves first without guilt. Every single one of those qualities is something you've denied in yourself. You've learned to be uncertain rather than confident, to care desperately what others think, to put everyone else first, to feel guilty when you have needs. The narcissist became your container for all these disowned parts. And that's partly why the bond was so intense. You weren't just attracted to them. You were attracted to the possibility of becoming whole by merging with someone who carried what you'd rejected. But here's the trap. This kind of attraction isn't love. It's unconscious compensation. It's your psyche trying to achieve balance by finding externally what you've lost internally. And this is why the relationship became addictive. Every time they hurt you, every time they withdrew their validation, every time they made you feel small, something in your unconscious said, if I can just make them love me, if I can just be good enough, patient enough, understanding enough, I'll finally prove my worth. You weren't addicted to them. You were addicted to the identity they allowed you to maintain, the one who saves, the one who endures, the one who loves unconditionally. This is where persona comes in. Persona is the mask we wear for the world, the social identity we construct to navigate relationships and society. In that relationship, you wore a very specific persona, the healer, the patient one, the understanding partner. the person who never gives up. Maybe you took pride in this identity. Maybe people admired you for your capacity to stay, to forgive, to keep trying. Maybe you even built your sense of self around being this person. But here's what happens when you wear a mask for too long. You forget it isn't your face. Your entire sense of self becomes defined by the role you're playing. All your psychic energy flows into maintaining this false identity. And when the relationship ended, when you finally walked away, that mask cracked. The persona that held your sense of self together dissolved. And underneath, you found nothing you recognized. This is why you feel empty. You didn't just lose a person. You lost your primary identity. The you who existed in relation to them is gone. But the you who exists independently, authentically, hasn't fully formed yet. All the energy you invested in being the understanding partner, the healer, the martyr, all of that energy has withdrawn. It's pulled back into the unconscious, leaving a void in your conscious awareness. It's like someone unplugged the machine that powered your sense of self. Suddenly there's darkness. Suddenly there's silence. Suddenly there's nothing where something used to be. But here's what you need to understand. Lady, this emptiness isn't the problem. It's not a sign that you made a mistake or that something's wrong with you. This emptiness is the necessary first stage of a profound transformation. You're experiencing what's called ego death. The structure of I that you've identified with for so long is dissolving. And yes, it feels like dying. Because in a very real psychological sense, it is a kind of death. The death of the false self. The death of the persona. The death of the identity that was built on pleasing, performing, and proving. This death is not the end. It's the beginning. Because you cannot build an authentic self on the foundation of a false one. You cannot become whole while clinging to a persona that was never really you. The emptiness you're feeling is the space where transformation happens. It's the darkness before dawn. It's the silence before new life speaks. And to understand this fully, we need to go deeper still. We need to descend into what's called the nigredo, the blackening, the darkest phase of the alchemical process, where everything must be reduced to its essential elements before it can be reborn as gold. Let's talk about what's actually happening inside you right now. Not the surface experience of sadness or loneliness, but the deeper psychological process that's unfolding in the hidden layers of your psyche. When you look at your life right now, everything probably feels meaningless. The things that used to bring you joy don't touch you anymore. The future feels gray and formless. You go through the motions of your day, but there's no vitality in it. No color, no life. You might think this means you're depressed or that something's wrong with you or that you'll never feel normal again. But from the perspective of depth psychology, what you're experiencing is actually a very specific process. A necessary process. You're in the nigredo. Throughout history, philosophers and mystics have studied alchemy, the ancient practice of transforming base metals into gold. For centuries, people thought this was just primitive chemistry. But depth psychology revealed something profound. Alchemy was never really about external transformation. It was always a symbolic system for describing the transformation of the soul. The alchemical process has 3 main stages, and each one corresponds to a specific phase of psychological transformation. Right now, you're in the first stage, nigredo, the blackening. This is the phase of decomposition, dissolution, death. In alchemical texts, the nigredo is described as the darkest phase, where the material must be broken down completely. It's often symbolized by a black sun, a raven, or a decomposing body. Everything that was structured and solid becomes formless and chaotic. Psychologically, this is what's happening to your sense of self. The structure of identity that held you together, the persona you wore, the roles you played, the beliefs you held about who you are. All of this is decomposing, And it feels like death because the ego experiences this dissolution as an existential threat. Your ego says, I am this person who loves this way, who behaves this way, who values these things. When those structures start to crumble, the ego panics. It feels like you're disappearing. But here's the truth. The ego doesn't understand you're not disappearing. The false you is disappearing. The constructed you, the persona you, the you that never was, is finally dissolving so that the real you can emerge. There is no coming to consciousness without pain. This is one of the most important insights in all of psychology. You cannot wake up to who you really are without experiencing the death of who you thought you were. You cannot be reborn without first being reduced to your essential elements. The nigredo is necessary. This darkness is burning away everything that was never authentically you. Every pattern you adopted to survive. Every belief you internalized to feel safe. Every mask you wore to be loved. All of it is being incinerated in this black fire of emptiness. And yes, it's excruciating. But it's also sacred, because what survives this fire is real. What emerges from this darkness is true. After the nigredo comes, the albedo, the whitening. This is when the first light begins to pierce the darkness. Moments of clarity start to break through. You begin to see things you couldn't see before. In the albedo, you start to recognize your own complicity, not in a self-blaming way, but in a truthful way. You see that you weren't just a victim. You made choices. You stayed when you could have left. You ignored red flags. You prioritized their needs over your own. This isn't about shame. It's about sight. The albedo brings the insight. I wasn't just in a relationship with a narcissist. I was in a relationship with my own patterns, my own wounds, my own unconscious needs. You begin to see both people clearly, not the idealized version you projected onto them in the beginning, not the demonized version you cling to now, but the actual human being they are, wounded, defended, trapped in their own prison of false self. And you begin to see yourself clearly too, not as the pure, selfless empath who loved too much, but as a complex human being with your own shadow, your own unconscious needs, your own places where you abandon yourself. The albedo is uncomfortable because it requires you to give up the simple story. The story where they're the villain and you're the victim. The story where you're purely good and they're purely bad. These stories are comforting because they're simple, but they're not true. And truth is what heals. Finally, after the albedo comes the rubedo, the reddening. This is the stage of rebirth, integration, wholeness. This is when life force returns to your body, but it's different now. It doesn't come from outside, from another person's validation or attention. It comes from within. It comes from the union of your conscious self with everything you'd pushed into shadow. The rubedo is characterized by a feeling of solidity, authenticity, inner authority. You no longer need anyone else to tell you who you are. You know. You feel it in your bones. This is the gold that alchemy speaks of. Not actual gold, but psychological gold, the integrated self, the individuated person, the human being who has made peace with all their parts and emerged whole. The work of Carl Jung, empath and personal development, guides us through is precisely this, the integration of shadow. And this is where the real healing happens, not in positive thinking or affirmations or trying to get over it quickly, but in the courageous act of turning toward everything you've rejected in yourself. Let me explain what shadow actually means. The shadow is all the parts of yourself that you've denied, repressed, or refused to acknowledge. It's not just the bad parts. Bad. It's anything that doesn't fit with your conscious self-image. For you, as someone who identifies as empathetic, caring, and giving, your shadow probably contains things like selfishness, coldness, anger, the desire to be taken care of, rather than always being the caretaker, the wish to be admired, rather than always admiring others, the capacity to say no without guilt, the ability to walk away from people who drain you. In your relationship with the narcissist, you split yourself into all good and all bad. You maintain the persona of the infinitely patient, understanding, compassionate partner. But all the parts that didn't fit that image, your anger, your needs, your boundaries, your self-protection, you pushed down into shadow. And here's what happens with shadow material. It doesn't go away. It goes underground. And from underground, it controls you. It comes out sideways in passive aggression, in self-sabotage, in choosing partners who hurt you, in an unconscious pattern of self-abandonment. The narcissist wasn't just someone who hurt you. They were also someone who carried your disowned qualities. Their confidence, their self-focus, their ability to put themselves first, these are shadow elements for you. Qualities you need, but have rejected. And this is the profound work of shadow integration, not becoming a narcissist, but reclaiming these qualities in healthy form. Learning that you can have confidence without arrogance. That you can focus on your own needs without being selfish. That you can put yourself first sometimes and still be a good person. The invitation of this emptiness is to meet all these disowned parts, to sit with your anger and let it teach you about your boundaries, to feel your needs and let them guide you toward self-care, to acknowledge your desire to be cherished and let it inform how you choose partners, to embrace your darkness and discover that it's not evil, it's just human. There's a revolutionary statement in depth psychology: I would rather be whole than good. This is liberation. Because trying to be good means rejecting half of yourself. It means maintaining a persona, living in a mask, and never feeling fully real. But choosing wholeness means accepting all of you. The light and the shadow, the kindness and the rage, the generosity and the selfishness. When you integrate your shadow, something magical happens. You stop projecting it onto others. You stop attracting narcissists because you're no longer seeking your disowned power in other people. You stop abandoning yourself because you've claimed your right to take up space. This is why the relationship with the narcissist was necessary, not because they were good for you, but because they reflected back everything you needed to see about yourself. Every time they crossed a boundary and you stayed, they were showing you, you don't believe you deserve boundaries. Every time they withheld love and you tried harder, they were showing you, you don't believe you're inherently worthy. The narcissist was your mirror. A harsh mirror, a painful mirror, but a mirror nonetheless. They reflected the parts of your relationship with yourself that needed healing. And now in this emptiness, you have the opportunity to do the real work. Not the work of getting over them, but the work of meeting yourself fully for the first time. All of yourself. Even the parts you've been taught to hate, hide, or deny. This is the sacred descent, the journey into the underworld that every hero must make, the dark night that precedes enlightenment, the death that makes rebirth possible. You're not broken. You're breaking open, and what's breaking open is the shell that's kept your true self imprisoned all these years. Now let's make this practical. Because understanding is beautiful, but embodiment is everything. Knowledge about the psyche is helpful, but it doesn't heal by itself. Healing happens in practice, in daily choices, in the small moments where you choose yourself again and again, until that choice becomes natural. So let's talk about how to actually move through this emptiness and emerge transformed. These aren't quick fixes. They're practices that done consistently rewire your relationship with yourself at the deepest level. First, practice conscious suffering. I know this sounds counterintuitive. Everything in our culture tells us to avoid pain, to get over things quickly, to stay positive. But there's ancient wisdom in sitting with pain rather than running from it. The emptiness you're feeling right now is not your enemy. It's not something to medicate, distract from, or rush through. It's a teacher. And it has something crucial to tell you about who you are and what you need. So here's the practice. Set aside 10 minutes each day to simply sit with the emptiness, not to analyze it, not to make it go away, not to understand it, just to be with it. Feel it in your body. Notice where it lives in your chest, your throat, your stomach. Breathe with it. Let it be exactly as it is. This practice does something profound. It teaches your nervous system that uncomfortable emotions don't destroy you. That you can survive feeling empty, sad, lost without needing to immediately fix it or fill it with something external. Most of us never learn this. We learn to avoid difficult emotions at all costs, to stay busy, to seek pleasure, to numb out. But every time you avoid an emotion, you reinforce the belief that you can't handle it. And that belief keeps you small, keeps you seeking outside yourself for relief. When you can sit with emptiness and survive it, when you can feel the void and not collapse into it, you develop something called distress tolerance. This is psychological resilience. This is the capacity to be with what is without needing to change it immediately. And here's what happens after you sit with the emptiness for a while without resistance. Something shifts. The emptiness doesn't necessarily go away, but your relationship to it changes. It becomes less threatening, less overwhelming. Just another weather pattern moving through your inner landscape. Second, practice active imagination. This is a specific technique developed in analytical psychology for dialoguing with the unconscious. Your unconscious mind is trying to communicate with you through symptoms, through dreams, through the very emptiness you're feeling. But you need to give it a voice. Here's how you do it. Sit down with a journal and write a letter to the empty part of yourself. Address it directly. Dear emptiness, or dear lost part of me, or however it feels right to you. Then ask it questions. What do you need? What are you trying to tell me? What do you want me to know? This might feel strange at first. You might think you're just making things up. But stay with it. Write the questions, then let your hand move, and write whatever comes without censoring or editing. Let the emptiness write back to you. What usually happens is profound. The unconscious has been trying to speak to you all along, but you haven't been listening. Through active imagination, you give it permission to communicate directly. And what it tells you is often exactly what you need to hear. Maybe it tells you that it's tired of taking care of everyone else. Maybe it tells you that it needs rest space, permission to just exist without being useful. Maybe it tells you that it's angry or scared or desperately lonely. Whatever it says, listen. Because this is your own deep wisdom speaking. Third, practice reclaiming your projections. Remember, you projected qualities onto the narcissist that actually belong to you. Now it's time to take those projections back and develop these qualities in yourself. Make a list. What did I admire about them? Write down everything without judgment. Their confidence, their ability to command attention, their certainty, their self-focus, their power. Now next to each quality write, where is this quality asleep in me? For example, next to confidence, you might write, I've been afraid to own my knowledge and abilities. I've been diminishing myself. Then for each quality, create one small practice to develop it. If it's confidence, maybe you start speaking up more in meetings. If it's self-focus, maybe you dedicate an hour each day entirely to your own interests without guilt. If it's power, maybe you start making decisions without seeking everyone else's approval first. This is how you retrieve your energy from external projections and bring it back home to yourself. You stop seeking in others what you need to develop in yourself. Fourth, practice embodiment. The emptiness lives primarily in your head, in your thoughts, in the stories you tell about what this all means. But your body holds different wisdom. When you're stuck in emptiness, you're disconnected from your body. You're living in mental loops, analyzing, remembering, worrying. Your body becomes just the vehicle that carries your head around. Embodiment practices help you return to physical sensation, to the present moment, to the reality of being alive in a body. This could be breath work, where you focus entirely on the sensation of air moving in and out. It could be movement, dancing, walking, yoga, anything that brings you into sensation rather than thought. It could be grounding practices, standing barefoot on grass or earth, feeling the solidity of ground beneath you, putting your hands in water and really feeling the temperature, the texture, the wetness, eating slowly and tasting each bite. These practices might seem too simple to matter, but they're profound. When you're in your body, you can't be lost in the story of emptiness. When you're feeling the earth beneath your feet, you remember you're alive. When you're tasting food, you're present. The emptiness loses its power when you're embodied, because emptiness is a mental state. It's a story about lack. But your body right now is full of sensation. Your heart is beating. Your lungs are breathing. Life is moving through you, whether you feel it or not. Now let's talk about rewriting your internal narrative. The story you tell yourself about what happened shapes your entire experience of healing. And right now, you're probably telling yourself some version of this story. I loved them, and they destroyed me. I'm empty because they left. I'm damaged. This story feels true. It has emotional truth, but it's not the deepest truth. And as long as you stay in this story, you stay in victimhood. You give all the power to them and to what happened, and you leave none for yourself. Here's the reframe that shifts everything. I used them as a mirror for my unlived life. I projected onto them qualities I needed to develop in myself. I stayed because I was avoiding my own growth. I'm empty because I'm shedding a false self, not because I lost a real love. This isn't about blaming yourself. It's about reclaiming your agency. It's about seeing that you were an active participant in this dynamic, which means you have the power to choose differently. The old identity was the empath who saves broken people, the victim who suffered noble suffering, the one who loves no matter what. But there's a new identity emerging. Not the opposite, not a hardened, closed-off person who never helps anyone, but something more mature, more nuanced, more whole. This new identity is someone who loves consciously, not compulsively. Someone who helps with clear boundaries, not from martyrdom. Someone who feels deeply but isn't destroyed by others' emotions. Someone who stands in their power softly but unshakably. This is what's called individuation in depth psychology. It's the process of becoming who you truly are, distinct from who your family wanted you to be, who society expects you to be, who your wounds have shaped you to be. Individuation is the work of a lifetime, but this relationship has accelerated it. The pain has cracked you open. The emptiness has cleared space. Now you have the opportunity to fill that space, not with another person, not with another role, but with your authentic self. Let's talk about practical boundaries, because without boundaries, everything we've discussed remains theoretical. You attracted a narcissist partly because you didn't have strong boundaries. You thought boundaries were unloving, selfish, unkind. But here's the truth: healthy love is boundaried love. Period. Without boundaries, there's no real relationship. There's just fusion, enmeshment, codependency. A boundary is simply a line that says, "This is where I end, and you begin. I'm responsible for my feelings, and you're responsible for yours. I can care about you without carrying you. I can love you without fixing you." Learning to set boundaries might feel impossible right now. You might fear that having boundaries makes you selfish, that people will abandon you if you're not endlessly giving, that saying no means you're a bad person. These fears come from old programming, from messages you received early in life about what makes you lovable. But they're not true, and you can reprogram them through practice. Start small. Practice saying no to things you don't want to do. Without explanation, without apology, without justification. No, that doesn't work for me. Full stop. Practice speaking up when something bothers you rather than swallowing it to keep the peace. Practice leaving situations that drain you without feeling guilty about it. Every time you honor a boundary, you're teaching yourself, my needs matter. My comfort matters. I am worth protecting. And every time you teach yourself this, you become less attractive to narcissists because narcissists are attracted to people with weak boundaries. Here are the red flags you'll never miss again. Love bombing, where someone overwhelms you with affection and intensity too soon. This isn't love. This is manipulation designed to create a bond before you have a chance to see who they really are. Boundary testing, where they push against your limits to see how much you'll tolerate. This is how they train you to accept unacceptable behavior. Lack of accountability, where they never genuinely apologize, but instead say things like, "I'm sorry you feel that way." Which is not an apology, it's a deflection. Gaslighting, where they make you doubt your own perception, memory, or sanity. And that never happened. You're too sensitive. You're crazy. Triangulation, where they compare you to others to make you jealous or insecure or to create competition for their attention. But more important than red flags in others are green flags within yourself. This is how you know you're healing. You pause before overgiving. You notice when you're performing authenticity rather than being authentic. You don't need to save anyone to feel valuable. You can sit with someone's pain without fixing it. You choose connection based on compatibility, not on the intensity of your feelings or the depth of their need. The ultimate protection against narcissists isn't walls or coldness or suspicion. It's wholeness. When you're whole within yourself, when you don't need someone else to complete you, when you're no longer seeking your disowned parts in other people, you naturally attract differently. You attract from abundance rather than from lack. And abundance attracts abundance. Wholeness attracts wholeness. This is the journey from codependency to healthy interdependence. From fusion to genuine intimacy. From needing to be needed to choosing to share. Let me paint a picture of who you're becoming. Not who you were before the relationship. That person couldn't have survived what you've survived. Not who you were during the relationship. That person was living in a mask, a persona, a false self. But who you are now emerging from this fire. You're becoming someone who loves deeply, but not desperately. Someone who can feel powerful emotion without being destroyed by it. Someone who sees people clearly, not through the distortion of projection, but as they actually are. Someone who knows their worth without needing external validation to prove it. You're becoming someone who carries both light and shadow with grace, who acknowledges their capacity for anger without becoming cruel, who owns their needs without becoming selfish, who maintains boundaries without becoming cold. You're becoming someone who is magnetic, not because you're perfect, but because you're real. Because you've stopped performing, stopped pleasing, stopped trying to earn love through self-abandonment. And that realness, that authenticity, that groundedness in self, that's what actually attracts healthy love. This is the paradox of healing. You won't return to who you were. That version of you was incomplete, was playing a role, was unconsciously participating in dynamics that hurt you. You're becoming more than you were. You're becoming your full self, the version that includes all the parts you've denied, rejected, or hidden. The person who entered that relationship was seeking completion through another person. The person emerging from this emptiness is complete within themselves and seeking companionship, not completion. There's a profound statement in depth psychology that I want you to feel in your bones. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, not who you should be, not who would make others comfortable, not who fits some ideal, but who you truly are in all your complexity, contradiction, and wholeness. This pain you're experiencing, this emptiness, this dark night of the soul, this is your initiation. This is the fire that forges you into your truest form. The emptiness is not a void, it's a chrysalis. And what's emerging will astonish you. Let's talk about the power you're claiming right now, whether you fully realize it yet or not. You're claiming the power to say no without guilt. The revolutionary power of no as a complete sentence requiring no explanation or justification. You're claiming the power to say yes freely, not from obligation or fear of disappointing others, but from genuine desire and alignment. The power to change your mind, to be uncertain, to not have all the answers, to be imperfect and still inherently worthy. You're claiming the right to take up space, to have needs, to be prioritized sometimes, to receive as much as you give, to be ordinary and still valuable, to rest without being productive, to exist without justifying your existence through usefulness. These might sound like small things, but they're everything. Because reclaiming these powers means reclaiming yourself from a lifetime of conditioning that taught you to be small, accommodating, selfless, to the point of self-erasure. And here's what this makes possible: a new kind of love. Not the codependent love you knew, where two incomplete people cling to each other, trying to become whole. But interdependent love, where two whole people choose each other and grow together. In interdependent love, you don't need your partner, you choose them. You don't complete each other, you complement each other. You don't lose yourself in them, you bring your full self to the relationship and invite them to do the same. This is love as expansion rather than completion. Love as two people supporting each other's growth rather than one person sacrificing themselves for the other. Love as partnership rather than rescue mission. And the beautiful thing is, you can't have this kind of love until you've done this work. Until you've faced your shadow. Until you've integrated your projections. Until you've become whole within yourself. Which means this pain, as much as it hurts, is making you capable of real love for the first time. Now I want to return to the emptiness with new eyes. That void you've been fearing, that space inside you that feels like death. What if it's not what you think it is? What if that void isn't emptiness at all, but space for your authentic self to breathe without the constriction of old patterns? Space for your shadow to be seen without shame. Space for your soul to stretch into its full dimension. Space for your true power to rise without apology. You've been trying to fill this space with distraction, with memories, with analysis, with longing. But what if the space doesn't need to be filled? What if it needs to be honored as sacred ground where something new is being born? In Buddhist philosophy, there's a concept called sunyata, usually translated as emptiness or voidness. But it doesn't mean nothingness in the way we typically understand it. It means the absence of inherent fixed identity. It means openness to all possibilities. It means potential. The patterns in psychology echo this ancient wisdom that emptiness is not lack, but fullness of potential. That the void is not death, but the womb of creation. That silence is not absence, but the space where new music can begin. You're not empty because you're missing something. You're empty because you're making room for yourself, your actual self, the one that's been buried under personas and projections and performances for so long that you forgot it existed. The void is the womb, and you, the real you, are being born. Let me tell you what this means for the relationship you just left. You've probably been thinking that the narcissist was your soulmate or your great love, or the one who got away. But from this new perspective, You can see clearly they were your teacher. Not a kind teacher, not a gentle teacher, but the exact teacher you needed to force you into this confrontation with yourself. They reflected back everything you needed to see about your patterns, your wounds, your unconscious beliefs about love and worth. Every time they crossed a boundary and you stayed, they were teaching you, you don't believe you deserve respect. Every time they withheld love and you tried harder, they were teaching you, you don't believe you're inherently lovable. Every time they made you small and you accepted it, they were teaching you, you don't believe you have the right to take up space. These were painful lessons, but they were necessary because you couldn't see these patterns when everything was comfortable. You could only see them when they were reflected back to you with such painful clarity that you had no choice but to look. So here's what I'm inviting you to do. Bless them. Not because they deserve it, not because what they did was okay, but because blessing is how you release. Blessing is how you complete the lesson and move forward. Bless them for being the catalyst. Bless them for showing you what you needed to heal. Bless them for pushing you to the edge where you finally chose yourself. Bless them and release them back to their own journey, their own lessons, their own pain. And more importantly, bless yourself. Bless yourself for having the courage to stay until you learned the lesson. Bless yourself for having the courage to leave once you did. Bless yourself for being willing to face this emptiness rather than running back to comfort. Bless the emptiness itself for being your midwife. Bless the darkness for birthing your light. Bless the dissolution for making room for integration. Bless the death for allowing rebirth. This is the final stage of the alchemical process. This is the rubido, the reddening, where the gold of the soul finally emerges from the fire of transformation. And here's the truth you need to hold. You're not empty because you're missing them. You're empty because you're making room for yourself, the person you truly are, the person you've always been, beneath the conditioning, beneath the wounds, beneath the personas. The void is not a hole, it's a doorway. And on the other side is the version of you that no longer needs to prove, perform, please, or perfect. The version that simply is and knows that is enough. You've been through the nigredo, the darkness, the decomposition, the death of the false self. You're moving through the albedo, the dawning awareness, the clarity, the seeing of what was always true. And you're approaching the rubido, the return of life force, but this time from within. This time from truth. What emerges from this process is what depth psychology calls the individuated self. Not the ego trying to be special or better than others, but the self-integrated and whole containing both light and shadow, both strength and vulnerability, both independence and the capacity for genuine connection. This self doesn't need another person to feel complete, doesn't need validation to know its worth, doesn't need to save anyone to feel valuable. This self simply is. And in that being finds peace. I know right now it might not feel like you're approaching anything peaceful. It might feel like you're still in the depths of darkness, still lost in the emptiness. But trust this, you are exactly where you need to be. The journey from old self to new self must pass through emptiness. There's no shortcut, no bypass, no way to avoid the descent. Because the emptiness is not an obstacle to your healing, it is the healing. Every moment you sit with the void without running away, you're growing stronger. Every moment you feel the pain without numbing it, you're developing resilience. Every moment you resist the urge to fill the space with another person, another project, another role, you're creating room for your authentic self to emerge. This is the sacred work that the field of Carl Jung empath and personal development has illuminated for us, that the path to wholeness goes through darkness, not around it. That healing is not about feeling better quickly, but about feeling everything fully and surviving it. That transformation is not comfortable. but it is possible. You are possible. The you that you're becoming whole, authentic, powerful in your softness, and soft in your power. That person is not just possible, but inevitable, if you keep walking this path. So here's my invitation to you. Don't rush this. Don't try to speed through the emptiness to get to the other side. Be here. Be in this darkness. Let it teach you what only darkness can teach. Because when you emerge, and you will emerge, you won't be the person who needs to be needed. You won't be the person who loves from wound rather than from wholeness. You won't be the person who abandons themselves for others' approval. You'll be someone who loves consciously, who helps from overflow, not from depletion, who maintains boundaries, not from selfishness, but from self-respect, who chooses people not from desperation, but from discernment. You'll be free. Not free from feeling pain. Pain is part of being human. But free from the patterns that kept you stuck. Free from the unconscious drives that made you choose people who hurt you. Free from the belief that you must earn love through suffering. This freedom is your birthright, and this emptiness is the labor that births it. You are not broken. You are breaking open like a seed that must split to grow, like an egg that must crack to release what's inside, like a chrysalis that must dissolve completely before the butterfly can emerge. What's emerging is more than you've ever been, more honest, more whole, more you. And when you look back on this time, and you will look back, you won't see it as the time you lost yourself. You'll see it as the time you found yourself. The time you died to who you thought you had to be and were born into who you actually are. So be patient with yourself. Be gentle with this process. And know that the emptiness you fear is actually the greatest gift you've ever been given. Because it's not the end of your story. It's the beginning of your becoming. The gold was always inside you. You just had to burn away everything that wasn't gold. And now, standing in the ashes, you're discovering that what remains is precious beyond measure. You. If this resonated with you, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Share one thing you're letting go of, one pattern you're breaking, one truth you're finally seeing. Your story matters, your voice matters, and your healing journey might be exactly what someone else needs to hear to take their first step. Subscribe if you want more content that doesn't just educate, but transforms. Share this with someone who needs to hear that the emptiness is not the end, it's the beginning. And remember, you're not healing to become who you were. You're healing to become who you've always been meant to be. The emptiness is not the enemy. It's the teacher. It's the midwife. It's the sacred space where you're being reborn. Welcome home to yourself.